All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a moment that absolutely reshaped the course of Indian history.
So let's get right to it. How on earth did a trading company's rule, something built up over 100 years, just explode into what became the First War of Independence in 1857? You've got to understand, this wasn't just some military revolt. It was a flashpoint for a whole nation's anger.
Okay, so the thing to remember is that the 1857 conflict didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, this was the culmination of a century of simmering tension. The East India Company had been methodically, and I mean methodically, expanding its power, and the people of India were really starting to feel the squeeze from every direction.
The British had this four-part playbook for expanding their power. First, pretty straightforward, you had outright wars. Then they'd push Indian princes into these so-called subsidiary alliances, which basically stripped them of all their power. They'd also just annex states like Awadh, using the excuse of misrule. And then there was this one particularly sneaky policy we're about to look at, the doctrine of lapse.
Now, this doctrine of lapse, wow. On paper, it just sounds like a dry political rule, right? But in reality, it was seen as a profound attack on Indian tradition and heritage. It completely ignored the ancient practice of adopting an heir. So if a ruler died without a son, the British could just swoop in and absorb these ancient kingdoms, which is exactly what they did with places like Jhansi and Nagpur.
But see, all that political stuff, that was just one piece of the puzzle. To really get why 1857 blew out the way it did, we need to look at the grievances that were boiling over in pretty much every aspect of Indian life. First up, there was this widespread social and religious panic. Seriously, British reforms, even the ones that were maybe well-intentioned, were often seen as a total assault on tradition. People were deeply suspicious that things like Western education and new laws were just a trick to encourage conversion to Christianity. Even new tech, like the railways, sparked total panic, with rumors flying around that they were designed to destroy the caste system.
Next, let's talk about the economic devastation. We're talking about a systematic drain of wealth from India straight to England. British policies basically crippled India's world-famous textile industries with huge taxes, while at the same time flooding the market with cheap British goods. This just bankrupted countless artisans and completely shattered the old aristocracy, as thousands of landlords lost their estates. It created this whole new class of broke and very, very angry nobles.
And this table right here, it says it all when it comes to the military. The Indian soldiers, the sepoys, they were the absolute engine of the company's army. But the discrimination they faced was just humiliating. I mean, look at this. They were paid less, housed poorly, and had zero chance of ever being promoted past the junior rank of subadar. Even their own religious customs, like wearing a beard or caste marks, were forbidden.
And this was the final straw for so many of them. For high-caste Hindus, crossing the sea was a huge religious taboo. It meant you could lose your caste, your place in society, everything. By forcing them to serve overseas, the British showed they had absolutely no regard for their deepest beliefs. You combine that with the infamous rumor about the rifle cartridges greased with animal fat, and you've got a direct attack on their religious identity. That's what lit the fuse.
So the war was eventually put down by the British, but it sent massive shockwaves through their entire system. It was a crystal clear sign that the East India Company's way of doing things was completely unsustainable. This led to a total rethink of how India was going to be governed.
And the aftermath came swiftly. In 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act, which officially dissolved the East India Company. Just like that, they were gone. Power was transferred directly to the British Crown, and Queen Victoria issued a big proclamation promising religious freedom and equal treatment. A whole new era, the British Raj, had just begun.
One of the most immediate and telling changes was in the army. To make sure another uprising could never happen, they dramatically increased the proportion of British soldiers to Indian soldiers. In the really critical Bengal Army, the ratio was set to 1 British soldier for every 2 Indian sepoys. And crucially, all the important stuff, the artillery, the strategic posts, were now exclusively in European hands.
But here's the great irony in all of this. Out of the ashes of the 1857 war, something new and incredibly powerful started to grow, a unified sense of Indian identity. This shared experience of British rule and resistance started to forge a political awareness that went beyond just regional or religious lines.
And several things came together to really fuel this new nationalism. Shared economic pain created a common enemy.
Repressive British policies, like censoring local newspapers, totally backfired and just united people against them. And as social reformers were building up cultural pride, a booming newspaper industry was spreading ideas of liberty and independence all over the country. This really laid the groundwork for the first true all-India political movement.
But, it's never that simple. This new nationalist movement, which culminated in the founding of the Indian National Congress in 1885, wasn't one big happy family. It pretty quickly split into two distinct factions, with very, very different ideas on how to achieve freedom. And this slide lays out the difference perfectly. On one side, you had the early nationalists, or the moderates. These guys believed in British justice and used constitutional methods. They called it the 3 Ps, prayers, petitions, and protests, to ask for more rights, but within the empire. On the other side, you had the assertive nationalists. They had zero faith in British fairness and demanded Swaraj, or complete independence, through direct action like boycotts and mass movements. And this powerful line from Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a leading assertive nationalist, just captures this uncompromising new spirit. It was such a radical change from the polite petitions of the moderates. This was a demand, not a request, and it totally set the stage for a much more confrontational phase of the freedom struggle. And so, the movement was at a crossroads. Was it going to be the gradual constitutional path of the moderates, or the direct, all-out struggle of the assertives? This fundamental debate over strategy and goals would end up shaping the destiny of the nation for decades to come, defining the long and complicated road to freedom.